Oh, it looks like they're actually still going over their deck list, but no worries. We can talk about it a little bit. Mike Kravitz, no stranger whatsoever to top eights here, no stranger to Grixis Delver, has been playing it for several months. He is not packing anything particularly spicy in the main deck, I want to say. I think it's fairly standard. Let's go ahead and go over it, though. So he's going to have access to 4 Deathrite Shaman, 2 Young Pyromancer, 4 Delver of Secrets, 2 Gourmet Angler, and 2 True Name Nemesis. That seems to be industry standard at this point. Spells, 4 Lightning Bolt, 1 Fork Bolt. Seems fine to me. 4 Force of Will, 4 Daze, 4 Ponder, 4 Brainstorm, 3 Spell Pierce, 3 Gitaxian Probe, and here's the spicy, 3 Stifle. So most deck lists are on 3 Stifle here. That's fairly common. That's just what the Grixis Delvers tend to do nowadays. The Gitaxian Probe, however, not as common. It still is kind of like a remnant, I guess you could say, of when it had Cabal Therapy in the main. But Gitaxian Probe's not really vital to what the deck is doing nowadays. Most of the time, they cut Gitaxian Probe for like another Spell Pierce, one of Dismember, perhaps, some other flex spell cards here and there. But for the most part, it is cut Gitaxian Probe completely. So in the Swiss, at least, Mike had the advantage of going Gitaxian Probe, see your hand, and opponents might have to hide a few things, thinking that like, oh my gosh, is there a Cabal Therapy coming or something of that nature. It just gives them kind of a heads up, right? But here, it's definitely not the case. It's just seeing what's the thing that I can stifle. Now, lands, we don't really need to talk about lands. Pretty average here, so let's go to the sideboard. Mike's going to have access to 2 Cabal Therapy, a Flusterstorm, Pyroblast, Surgical Extraction, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, a Grim Lavamancer, 1 Forked Bolt, a Pithing Needle, 2 Diabolic Edict, 2 Ancient Grudge, and 1 Electrickery. All fine cards. I mean, I like what I hear. But it looks like we're going to get started, and we'll talk more about the sideboards and also the main deck for Francis shortly. So by virtue of his seed, Mike's going to get to go first. A huge advantage here in this particular matchup. Francis is on Portent Miracles, so he's going to be kind of under the gun. A lot of what Francis does, a lot of Francis' deck, is just geared to deal with every threat that Grixis Delver has, whether it's Terminus, Swords to Plowshares, for example, and then it has Jace, and in Francis's particular case, it has Gideon as well to kind of close the game out quickly, flood the board with tokens, whatever it needs to be at that moment. Mike Kravitz leads with a really early Gitaxian Probes, trying to get a lay of the land, scope it out. Looks like we have to play around Spell Snare this game, so pretty interesting one of here from Francis. It was also a card that you would see occasionally in the Miracle sideboards, or I'm sorry, in the Miracle list, just because it's really important to counter Tarmogoyfs, really important in the mirror to counter either Counterspell, Predict, or Counterbalance, and it's also a reasonable catch-all, quote-unquote, card at the 2-mana slot. You get Stoneforge Mystics, you get Dark Confidants potentially. You can get a lot of good cards at the 2-mana slot. So but the power of it is that played as a one of, traditionally at least, these decks, have to play kind of fair. They have to play around it. They have to make sure that they, maybe take a turn off to cast their things. Maybe they overload on 3s instead, and that kind of plays into your game a little bit and gives you enough time to amass some card advantage, etc. So looks like Kravitz going to 17 here, going to cast this Deathrite Shaman, but it looks like he's very, very, very land light and threat light too. This is the only thing that he can actually do this turn. I don't believe he has too much card draw in his hand. I saw a lot of Dazes and a Spell Pierce. We'll see how this ends up going. Francis very quickly fetching basic lands here. He's going to fall to 19. Swords to Plowshare on the Deathrite Shaman here. Waiting till his turn to do that just because, well, he didn't have white, right? But also because at this point, he's going to be able to do that with Spell Pierce backup or potentially just paying for days. Brainstorm for Mike Kravitz. He finds a land. That's not a particularly impressive land in this position, but it is a land. So he might have to keep it, might not. We'll see. He's debating whether or not to keep it. Oh, it looks like he's not. He did find a Misty Rainforest, so it's not vital to his game plan here. Excuse me. Francis Cellona already on 2 basics. It's going to be hard to disrupt him from this point onward. However, Mike does have access to Stifle, so he's going to be able to stifle some of these, it looks like. All right. Kravitz is going to go to 18 here. Francis Francis puts a stop on Mike's fetch line. Like, what are you going to do about it? There's a few things he could do. I mean, there are, if there were any permanents in play, at least there's some unexpectedly absent things that he could do. It's got the same kind of rules text as or same kind of usage as Submerge, for example. But all right, so Ponder, Mike Kravitz. He's got to find something. He's not working with very much right now. But these early turns are kind of set up that way overall. I think Mike's not going to be unhappy with a couple exchanges coming up. First off, most of the counterspells in Mike's deck versus Francis' deck are conditional. Spell Pierce, Daze. You can pay for those. That's not a problem. So as long as Francis just hits his land drops, he can deploy his threats at his pace. And as long as Mike doesn't have his own, then what's there to worry about? He's just a control deck swimming at a reasonable pace. He doesn't need to do anything. And because there's a spell snare also in his hand, and Mike probably wants to resolve some kind of young pyromancer eventually. I mean, that's good for him. But Francis is like, yeah, I'm just going to keep passing. I don't really mind too much. And playing around Stifle is obviously good for him, but overall, I would say unnecessary. There's another Force of Will, but I can't tell what those other two blue cards are. And if they're just cantrips, Mike is gonna probably want to ship them. Depending, so he has a Stifle in hand. 2 Force of Will, so that whatever this war coming up is, whatever this counter war may be, it's going to be something. Let's see. A True Name Nemesis would be pretty good for Mike eventually, but if it's in this top 3 here, I don't want it. Yeah, there is a True Name Nemesis there. Yeah, I definitely am not happy to see it. You haven't hit your 3rd land yet, but Delver of Secrets, however, could be pretty reasonable. Francis probably going to fire off a Brainstorm? No, I think he's okay leaving it as is. And looks like now that Mike is tapped out, he's going to go ahead and reach for his fetch land. At least one. Most unlikely to be both. I think he wants to hold on to one to get maximum value out of this Brainstorm, but he didn't have to crack his fetch land first to do that. Interesting. Oh, Snapcaster Swords. Seems reasonable. Potentially Mike could Daze the Swords to Plowshares, and then yeah, he could potentially Daze the Swords to Plowshares, but I think he's thinking, I don't know if I have time for that. I just want to get this. I need to protect this threat, and I need to, he's playing around Daze anyways. He's playing around Stifle even. So yeah, I'm gonna get rid of the Stifle. That might just be better. Looks like Francis going to Brainstorm to start off the turn. He needs a land. I think he found one, and he found a Gideon too. So there's a counter war ensuing, but I don't think Francis really wants to play that game. He's going to set it up Terminus Portent underneath it, and then he's going to pass the turn. And I think got a Force of Will. So Mike. Oh, okay. So Mike. Interestingly enough, Mike actually uses the Force of Will here as a way to kind of check his opponent. He's like, listen, I got a Force of Will now. Can you beat this? And on the following turn, we're going to get a Terminus. Yep. Mike's probably going to let this resolve. He doesn't have anything else going on, but he's probably got to let this resolve. He's got a Gurmag Angler in hand, which he could protect the following turn. But this Delver being in play could be really huge for him. The problem is Francis's follow-ups are nuts. Is Francis not going to pay for... So this is a Miracle Trigger. He's yet to pay for it. Well, okay, hold on. Yeah, so let's pay for it. There we go. Okay, so Francis is definitely casting it. I wanted to make that clear. Because there's a Stifle, potentially, as well. Like, you could Stifle the Miracle Trigger, and then Francis just doesn't get it, which is also acceptable. But we do know that Mike... Mike's at 15 now after that second Force of Will. We do know that Mike pitched the Stifle already, so Mike very quickly running accounts on 4 currently, and he can protect... Oh, no, he can't. He can't protect this Jace or this Gideon, so he's going to want... he's going to try to resolve one of them. Maybe? I mean, this might be going from bad to worse. Mike Kravitz, 3 Force of Will, pretty powerful in this matchup. Or in this particular game. And it looks like this Gideon, does Mike care about it, is the question. So we have a Daze. Francis could have Force of Will, but my Mike doesn't know. From what we've seen in earlier games. Float 1 pay. Sure. Interesting. Draw for my turn. So Mike going on a rampage right now. I don't think he needed to do it that way. I think he could have just... Oh, well, I guess he knew his top card, so it doesn't matter. So this Delver's not long for this world. We're going to get another Snapcaster Mage. Yeah, Mike's going to take a look at this graveyard. He's like, what do you got here? Just the Swords to Plowshares? I think that's fine. I guess the Daze was kind of losing value anyways because Francis does have a Spell Snare. We're going to go ahead and force the Snapcaster Mage straight up, feels like. Mike falls to 14. And this is quickly spiraling out of control. Francis is going to get a Brainstorm in response. It resolves. Flusterstorm in the main. Yeah, there is one Flusterstorm in the main. I wanted to confirm that. That is 100% a real card right now. Can Mike pay for all 3? No, I don't think so. It's Snapcaster, Force of Will, Flusterstorm, and so there's... Yeah, he cannot pay off for all 3. Yep. Snapcaster Mage resolves. Or I mean, Flusterstorm resolves, targeting Force of Will, and then I'm going to plow that. Sure. So now there's a little... The pressure is slightly off, and Francis is going to be able to resolve this Jace, and he's going to be pretty happy with that. The question is, does he play around Lightning Bolt on this following turn? The answer is probably no. All right. Jig is up, Francis. Jace has been there since the beginning anyways. Kravitz finds another True Name Nemesis, but oh man, brutal. All right, well, Mike has a pretty sizable graveyard. He can probably cast another Gurmag Angler fairly soon. So Jace is the play for him. Now, what does he do with this Jace? That is the question. Oh, he's going to bounce. Get in for 2. Falls to 13. And yeah, he knew with this Jace coming up, he wanted to save some more cards in his graveyard, but he didn't need to. He had it all. And it looks like this is happening once more. The exact amount of cards, every card in the graveyard. Man, this one man at 5/5 is pretty beastly. Portent's a great draw. Portent myself. Gonna take a look at the top 3 cards, arrange them as I like, draw a card on your upkeep. Portent can target any player. The person who draws a card is always the person casting Portent, but I can target any player and rearrange the top 3 of their library. I can make them shuffle, I can arrange it and leave it the way that I see fit. It's a pretty good card with Miracles. It's also a good card. It's also a very good card with Predict, which we do know Francis plays. I think there's one in his hand? Question mark. But he's gonna look at him. He's gonna look at the Portent. He's gonna want to shuffle that. He Portents himself, and he's gonna get to draw on Mike's turn. So that is the biggest downside to this card. It's not immediate, but it does get to set up some other things going on. And he's not actually even going to be able to predict that away. He doesn't want any of those cards anyways, so it's going to be okay. He ends up drawing a land. This Gurmag Angler, is threatening to chunk a lot of Francis' life, but that Snapcaster Mage jumps in the way, and then we're going to go ahead and get a Brainstorm here. Brainstorm, I believe... So Mike can find, if he needs it, he can find another land. He wants to probably get rid of this Young Pyromancer. Exactly, he's shifting to the front there. Probably wants to get rid of this Young Pyromancer because he knows Francis has Spell Snare. At a certain point, like you kind of think to yourself, maybe I just don't want Spell Snare at all, or I don't want to really play. Like I just want it out of his hand so I can, because that way I know what card is there. But looks like Francis setting up a Predict, it feels like. Probably doesn't want any more land, except for that fetch land. He's going to predict himself. He's going to get rid of... So he's going to get rid of the volcanic island on top. And then draw 2. Yeah. There you go. He draws another Portent, which we knew. Terminus. Oh, wow. Force of Will. Jeez. Come on, Mike. Mike goes to 12. All right. Portent himself. Set it up again. That's 2 miracles down. Francis also going to shuffle this. This went from bad to worse. Mike Kravitz has really attritioned Francis out, and Francis's hand was built to play that game. But 3 Force of Wills, did the trick. Yeah, and Francis desperately digging for a Swords to the Plowshares right now. He's not dead, but he has 3 turns, but he needs to stabilize. He needs to find, like, while Kravitz has nothing going on, he needs to find a way to get in here. Goes for another Ponder. He's like, well, I'm just going to cantrip till I find it. And he does find it finally. He doesn't absolutely need it, but it's good to have here. And I think, given the way this game's played out, yeah, I was going to say, like, I think you just want to go ahead and do it now. Don't wait for Mike to draw days. There's literally no reason to do that. And then Francis is going to fall to 10 after fetch land. And that's going to be pretty sure it for him right now. So we've got 4 basics total in play, insulated from Wasteland. And Mike... What the? Wait. Oh, was Francis... Oh, Francis only had planes. Wow, holy crap. So fetching there actually cost him a lot. I mean, I guess he knew that he was going to draw a bad one off Portent, but oh wow. Pretty crazy turn of events actually. Like this young Pyromancer resolving could be the nail in the coffin. Mike falls to 16 from that fetch land, but he's got a young Pyro in play. He can start chaining cantrips. Doesn't seem to be the case. That's a lightning bolt. That's going to advance the clock considerable amount. Actually, it's going to be lethal next turn if Francis has nothing, which we all know Francis has nothing. Francis falls to 3, and wow, in a hurry. That was some real patience and perseverance from Mike Kravitz. That's the thing about playing Delver is, knowing the key spells to counter is important, but even more so is the timing. It's a sense of expediency. Like, what is important right now? Like, if I don't counter this now, how many turns do I have to find another threat? How many turns do I have till my threats get invalidated, et cetera, et cetera? So, fighting over the Planeswalkers was one thing. He didn't fight over Jace, because I don't think he could at the time, but he fought over pretty much all the other things that affected the board that would allow blockers to exist, that would kind of set him behind on his clock, and he didn't have a very good clock in the first 2-3 turns, but slowly but surely, excuse me, so he amassed it, and moving into sideboards now, he's up a game, and that's going to be a huge advantage because he gets to play on game 3. But yeah, definitely Francis fetching for planes there really, really hurt him. That was basically the biggest mistake Francis made. I think he basically had that game at a stalemate, 100%. I mean, clearly, I don't think I have to repeat that, but he was at a stalemate, and then he fetched basic planes, and that just... Maybe he's on two Tundra? Nope, he's on the 3rd one. I don't know where it is, but he is on a 3rd Tundra. But even fetching a volcanic island there, I mean, it was a flooded strand, so pretty unfortunate turn of events, but the way that we're looking up now, we're going to go to sideboard. So Francis, for those of you, I guess, kind of just joining us, he did play on stream 1 or 2 games ago. And he's got his own kind of take, I guess, on Portent Miracles, which is Portent is 1 CMC spell, which we saw, and I explained a little bit, but for those of you just joining us, or who maybe weren't fully paying attention, it costs 1 blue. It says target player. Oh, look at the top 3 cards of target player's deck. You may rearrange them as you like, and then shuffle them. All right. So if all 3 cards are threats for your opponent, and you target your opponent, and you just like shuffle it. I don't want to see that. Or you can target yourself and then shuffle, and then it's basically a ponder, and then on the next upkeep you draw a card. So that's Portent. Very, very good synergy with Terminus. Also Entreat the Angels, but that's not featured here. Let's go over the deck list very quickly. 3 Snapcaster Mage, 3 Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, newly rotated but has found a home in Legacy, it seems. 4 Ponder, 4 Portent, 4 Terminus, 1 Council's Judgment. That's a lot of stuff in sorcery speed, but Terminus usually isn't, actually. 4 Force of Will, 4 Brainstorm, 2 Counterspell, 4 Swords to Plowshare, 3 Predict, a Spell Snare, and a Flusterstorm. Those are his kind of like flex slots, and I like them a lot. 4 Predict is way too much. I think 3 Predict is basically the optimal amount. I think there's some ways that you could get by on 2, but I think 3 is the perfect amount. Spell Snare is good in the mirror. It's good in it's good in a lot of situations, but it's definitely good in the mirror. It's also fine against like Ad Nauseam because you can counter like Cabal Ritual, or you can counter Infernal Tutor. And it's good in a variety of matchups in general. Flusterstorm, great against the Storm, as aforementioned. So you do have a weak Storm matchup as the Miracles player because you don't have access to counterbalance anymore, although some decks have kind of shifted towards that again because, having access to cantrips and 1s and 2s all throughout your deck is fairly common. So in the sideboard, Francis has 2 Aethersworn Canonist, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Disenchant, 2 Blood Moon, 2 Pyroblast, a Red Elemental Blast, and a Rest in Peace. Or 2 Rest in Peace. So there's a ton of cards I really love in this matchup, but I don't think you have room for all of them. So the first things I want to start with 2 Blood Moon, and I want to bring in the 2 Rest in Peace. 2 Rest in Peace is going to shut off Gurmag Angler, it's also going to shut off Deathrite Shaman, and it's also going to shut off Cabal Therapy, flashbacked. I don't know if Kravitz is thinking about bringing those in, but it's possible. And Rest in Peace doesn't harm you almost whatsoever, except for Snapcaster Mage. So you can kind of play around it a little bit, and you can just like try to resolve your Rest in Peace, maybe not on turn 2, or maybe like after you've gotten a little bit of value out of your Snapcaster Mage. But it's a bit of a tension, but I think it's powerful enough in this matchup that you want it. Pyroblast and Red Blast, you want some number of them. They're Vindicates for Delver of Secrets, but they also counter key things like Daze, Ponder, Force of Will, Ponder, Brainstorm, Stifle. These are spells that we don't really want resolving. True Name Nemesis. So those are going to be kind of key in this matchup. I don't know how important, but they will come up. I'm pretty sure. And then Blood Moon. Blood Moon, no introduction for Blood Moon. It's crazy versus Delver. They almost cannot beat it. Like slamming 2 enchantments back to back, like Rest in Peace, Blood Moon with basics. It's really hard for Delver to beat. Like all of those cards are just must counter, and they're almost game over. Maybe not Rest in Peace, but for sure Blood Moon. It gives him access to playing just one creature, which is Young Pyromancer, and then 5 spells: Lightning Bolt, Fork Bolt. I guess he can cast Gitaxian Probe. My apologies. He can cast those because you can pay life, but beyond that, everything comes at a cost, and it's going to be pretty hard to beat a Blood Moon on turn 3. Now, even with a Deathrite Shaman, you'd be surprised how quickly those fetch lands dry up after turn 2. He'd have to do a ton of work for that to really pay off. So I'm expecting some number of those. Maybe he doesn't really want Force of Will. This is not a matchup for Force of Will. Maybe he just wants Flusterstorm so he can fight during key instances, or obviously fight key instance. But for the most part, I think he wants to keep his main deck compact. He's going to keep the Terminus, going to keep even the counter spells, probably the 4 Swords to Plowshares, but we're probably going to cut down on some other things. I think the Spell Snare can go. There's not that many 2s out of Mike's deck besides Young Pyromancer, so if there's only 2, you probably don't need it right now. I mean, even out of the board, there's nothing I can think of. Nope, not really. Diabolic Edict maybe, but that doesn't do enough, and I think in this particular matchup, it's not good. Like, you can, like against Gideon, there's like a line where you can bolt a knight and then make someone sack Gideon as they're attacking, but that's pretty rare. Plus, there's Snapcaster Mages that could just ambush Viper in, and then you could sack that instead. So it's not reliable. Or just the fact that like Francis could never attack with Gideon, just make 2/2s all day, which Delver also has a huge problem beating. So yeah, I think Francis is definitely built to prey on the Grixis decks, but we just saw a few missteps in the last game. The biggest one being fetching a basic there. We would have thought that was good enough, but yeah. There's a Blood Moon. On Francis' side, he's got 5. That's 6 cards. 7. Oh wow. Okay, that's a good one. So he can go Island, Plains, Volcanic, Blood Moon. Does it resolve? Who knows? Oh my god, that's a Stifle. Gitaxian Probe. Jig is up. We see this this Blood Moon is coming. And but Kravitz, the crafty one, he has a Stifle. So all of these fetch lands are susceptible. And there's no interaction, quote unquote, from Francis here. That's why I was kind of surprised Francis didn't at least fetch there, but he does have 2 backup lands. If Kravitz decides to Stifle here, Francis can just get his fetch land into play next turn. But it is going to keep him off Blood Moon. It looks like Kravitz is going to pass. Francis plays his second fetch. Surgical Extraction. Kind of reasonable against Portent Miracles. It turns off Snapcaster Mages, but Mike, these players do have access to each other's deck lists, so let's see. Yeah, 1 fetch is good. That's fine. Kravitz falls to 19. This has been like such a stare down. Like, I don't want to crack my fetches. You crack your fetches. Kravitz also has a Pyroblast in his hand. I mean, that's going to be excellent versus Portent Miracles. They have 12 cantrips, and you don't mind, especially Portent. You don't mind hitting that one. That's a spell that, if it's targeting you especially, that is, oh boy. Let's see. Ponder coming up here. Kravitz pondering his outs here. Oh man, so Francis in a bit of a bind here. Both players fetching now. Yeah, you can have yours, Francis says. Kravitz fetches again. Wow, there's a lot of fetching going on. That one resolves. So also Francis does it. Let's see. 1 second, guys. It looks like I need a replacement really quickly. It's something I need to attend to. I will be right back, though.
All right, Chris is tagging out to use the restroom, so I will be replacing him real quick. My name is Adam. What is upstream? All right, so Francis is going to force a will here. Kravitz mulling over whether he wants to do force a will himself. I mean, some people like the rule of thumb that if your opponent feels it is worth a force of will, you probably should too. But that's not always true, and Kravitz is going to give it a think. Not sure how hard he wants to fight over this. Maybe 2 for 1ing his opponent is good enough. But his opponent feels the land's worth fighting over, so it's hard to say. All right, just going to let it happen. Yeah, it feels he got enough out of it, he thinks, and the force of will going to be useful later. Looking to fire something off here. Going to stifle the other fetch. In response, we're going to brainstorm. I'm a little surprised he didn't want to do that with both fetches still on the stack, like let the force of will resolve and then stifle, but whatever. So Francis is going to go ahead and brainstorm, put his 2 back, see if he wants to fight over this. I don't think he has the tools. He might just let it happen. Or maybe I misunderstood what was going on. I don't know. All right, thinking. All right, we're gonna untap. I'll tell you, as great as it is to watch Magic this way, talk about it. It's hard when you walk in the middle of a match, but we're gonna see how things play out. Kravitz drawing a Deathrite Shaman, historically a very good card in the Miracles matchup. I mean, after all, it does a lot of work in ways that Miracles isn't super able to deal with. So yeah, it's going to come down. I expect Francis doesn't have anything to fight with, but if he does, he's got to be fighting here. All right, so I'm gonna go with Plains. Oh, okay. So he has a Swords to Plowshares in hand, and figured he wants to fetch on Mike's turn, so that if Mike wants to fight, he has to do it before the untap and on his turn. All right, so end of turn, Mike gonna fire off a Brainstorm. Not gonna be the ideal Brainstorm that you want so bad. You're going to actually have to draw one of these two cards, and from the looks of it, draw both. But sometimes you just need to find specific things. In particular, I think Mike is just looking for some action. Has a pretty significant amount of reactive cards, but not a whole lot to do, and you don't want to be sitting idly by in this matchup. It's one of those questions you always have to ask yourself when you sit down in a game is, am I the aggro deck? Am I the control deck? I mean, if you're combo, it's a different story altogether, but when you're playing against Miracles, the vast majority of the time, you are the aggro deck. So here comes Young Pyromancer. I expect that's going to eat a Swords of Plowshares also, but Mike pretty likely to fight over it. It's the unfortunate thing about Swords of Plowshares being the weapon of choice against the card Young Pyromancer. But Francis is going to fire it off, and here comes the fight. So probably going to looking to use his Force of Will, shuffling it to the front. Probably pitching another Force of Will, but I don't see the blue card. Actually, just going to let it happen. Interesting. Mike if I had to guess, Mike is very aware of the possibility of something like this Blood Moon coming down and understands that that's the fight he needs to pick. Sure, I'd love to have a creature and have a clock, but instead I will trade that for being able to cast spells that I'll ever for the rest of the game. So, Francis is going to pass it back. Mike takes a draw, sees I believe that is a Grim Lavamancer. Another great card for the same reason that Deathrite Shaman is in this matchup. It's consistent damage. You don't really want to Terminus it, but you only have so many Swords to Plowshares, and you're not going to be able to just make a bunch of Monastery Mentor tokens to block. Mike probably debating how much Francis has to fight with, but ultimately just decides to play the Grim Lavamancer. In particular, Grim Lavamancer even better against something like Blood Moon, where you can still activate, unlike Deathrite Shaman. That being said, Francis doesn't seem to have another Blood Moon, and is just going to cast this Council's Judgment, hoping that works. Now, Francis doesn't have anything to do with that, so another creature finds its way to the exile. So Francis is doing a decent job of not succumbing to these threats, but is running out of answers pretty quickly. Here comes another Deathrite Shaman, and sometimes it truly is a miracle, and it comes rolling right off the top. And follow up with a Jace the Mind Sculptor, which is promptly going to get pyroblasted. All right, Chris is back. I'm going to let you guys enjoy his commentary. I'm going to go judge. I will see you later.
So sorry about that, folks. Just wanted to make sure that something was dealt with at the front of the store. I do definitely apologize about that. Okay, cool. All right, so now we're looking at this massive graveyard for both players. They are kind of all over the place. Going to go ahead and Surgical Extract. I think Mike is paying with life here, so he's going to get rid of all of these Terminus, which is going to be kind of key moving forward. It's not a spell he has to play around, and there's only so many Swords to Plowshares left in Francis's deck. In fact, 2 of them are in the graveyard now, so a lot of Kravitz's threats are going to go, unmolested. And just really quickly, big thank you to Adam, who's been judging this entire event. I mean, he's done an incredible job. He really has, and he's here comes here comes a true name nemesis. But big shout outs to Adam. He is our resident judge, and also your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Sometimes he works here at the shop, and he likes to hang out, get things done. Oh man, just a touch too late that Rest in Peace. We're gonna get a Predict instead, and I think Francis is going to get rid of the Rest in Peace and draw this Jace. That's what it seems like. Yep, Predict myself. Naming Rest in Peace. Yeah, it's too little too late for that. Is there a way for Francis to get back into this game? Absolutely. A Gideon would help him quite a lot, in fact. This Jace, not so much. That Swords to Plowshare, not as... No, oh, man, that's kind of brutal. Put the fetch land on top. We already have a fetch land in hand. Let's see. Let's make sure everything is... It's going to be really hard to deal with this True Name Nemesis. He needs a Snapcaster Mage. I think that's one way out of this. He's at 10. He's actually at 9. So he's on a perfect 3-turn clock. Ponder yields nothing. Oh, okay. So slight mistake on our metagame chart. Sorry, folks. I'm going to go ahead and fix that right now. Jace the Mind Sculptor resolves. What is it going to do, though? I mean, it's nothing that Mike really cares about, right? Okay, so this Pithing Needle is going to go ahead and name Jace the Mind Sculptor, it feels like. Yeah, it looks like Francis is not going to be able to beat this True Nemesis. And that's going to be all she wrote for our Legacy Quarters here. Mike Kravitz versus Francis Cellona ultimately beats Portent Miracles, which is kind of a bad matchup, but also, I mean, as we saw, it looks like he can grind it out and do fairly well. So that's going to be all for the quarters here. We may not have another match. We'll double check for you. I'll be right back shortly, and stay tuned for more Legacy, guys.